Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar on Gen Z and Millennials. This is the sixth edition of our youth study at Léger. We've started this before the pandemic, where we wanted to look at attitudes, perspectives, and opinions of Gen Y and Gen Z in Canada to sort of better understand these two generations, because they obviously matter to anyone making sort of business decisions in the country. And today I'm joined by Alison Watson, who is our VP Public Affairs in our Western Canada group of researchers, and Nicholas Lopez, who's Senior Research Director in our Central Canada team of researchers. And I'm Christian Bourque. I'm the EVP of the Eastern Canada team of researchers. We'll be talking today broadly about three main themes, which is perspectives on the future. Certainly in the context of the climate-related events we witnessed over the summer, we will see how attitudes of young Canadians may have changed. We'll be talking as well about how they are going through this sort of affordability crisis, who right now is a number one issue for all Canadians in the surveys that we are doing. And certainly you will see among Gen Z and Gen Y that it is an important issue as well. And lastly, we will talk about basically, what are they looking for in an employer? What's important to them? How do you make yourself more attractive to these young talents across the country? And sort of a nice little sort of simulator that we built together with our Léger Analytics team will allow us to actually get a lot deeper into that conversation in terms of what can make you more attractive. So without any further delay, I'll turn it over to the very competent hands of my colleague, Nicholas. Take it away.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you everybody for joining us. Over the next hour, we're going to be kind of diving in through those topics, and I'm going to lead us off kind of with a kind of introduction to what did we do. So we surveyed about 3,000 millennials and members of Generation Z across Canada. So about an even split between both. So the millennials and the members of Generation Z, about 1,500 in each category. If you look down below, kind of the distribution across kind of language, education level, living situation, and whether or not they're members of a visible minority community as well. So there were four main observations that came for the research, and these we're going to be walking through kind of these key observations from the research today. But the first is that, across both kind of generations, there's a feeling of anxiety and pessimism when it comes to the future of the planet. The second is about kind of the economic situation that's impacting their purchasing power and the ability to afford housing. The third is the financial pressures that have an impact on their employment decisions. So how does the current state of the economy really factor into the degree to which, young workers are considering changing jobs? Or what are they looking for in general in terms of their employer? And that leads us into the fourth. We know from previous research in kind of our youth study that, salary is an important factor in the decision making when somebody's choosing a job, especially for young people. But we also did something a little bit different this year to kind of, tease out what are the non kind of wage benefits that are important to some folks. So we have some interesting findings in there. So to start, let's dive in kind of on that first bullet point about the future, mainly focusing on kind of, what is making kind of those younger generations anxious and pessimistic, especially when it comes to the future of the planet. So to start, we asked the question, have you ever experienced major depression moments or moments of depression or periods of anxiety? If so, for how long? Looking at this on the whole, we haven't really seen a huge change from one generation or for 1 year to another. These are kind of consistent with what we saw last year. So about 78% indicating, they've experienced some moment of anxiety at some period of anxiety, 57% saying within the past 12 months. When it came to depression, 48% having ever experienced it, only 21% saying in the past 12 months. Now, as noted kind of in the 2022 study, we did find kind of some gender differences. So, women are more likely to experience periods of anxiety or moments of depression or other kind of major depression in their lifetime. We're seeing that kind of play out as well. But on the whole, comparing kind of Generation Z and millennials, roughly in line with each other in terms of the percentage of folks saying that, yes, I've experienced some form of anxiety or period of anxiety rather, and depression or depression rather in the last 12 months or longer. When we're talking about climate change, Canada obviously in the last over the summer experience, some pretty significant weather events, in particular with kind of wildfires that there were some wild images out there in the media that really kind of drove home how immediate the concern is. So 61% saying they're stressed about climate change, and we see this as kind of one of the top stressors for the younger generation. When we look at specifically when it comes to different kind of areas that we tested here, 67% believe kind of major upheavals will start soon, consequences around climate change. We're also noticing kind of that increase on the whole between both Generation Z and Millennials. So in comparison to our last kind of iteration of the research, up 7% for Generation Z, up 8% for Millennials. So certainly, climate change is really kind of pushing to the forefront of minds for younger people. Other kind of influences here that we took a look at was kind of what the role of technology in limiting the effects of climate change. And I think it's important to point that out because 53% saying that there is a role to limit the effects of climate change. So there is kind of an understanding that there might be opportunities to combat climate change, especially in the future as well. We also continually ask this question in terms of whether or not younger generations would want to have children later on. We also, previous research has indicated that, climate change is a factor in people considering whether or not they want to have children. We find that about 11% of young people feel uncomfortable bringing children into the world in the context of the climate crisis. Certainly a little bit higher among Generation Z. So looking at kind of that 15% here versus 9%. But on the whole, we are seeing that, there is a sizable proportion of younger folks in Canada who really aren't comfortable with the idea of bringing children into the world as a result of kind of that emerging climate crisis. And I think this is a number that we want to watch going forward as, it bleeds into a larger discussion about the behavioral changes that younger generations are making and the choices that they're making given kind of the context of the world in which they currently live in. One of the context features being the climate crisis and how that impacts decision making. We also took a look at kind of AI. Obviously, AI has been kind of a hot topic over the last 12 months. So we really wanted to, determine, what's the kind of usage uptake when it comes to artificial intelligence. We do find the younger cohort of the younger population, that Generation Z, more likely to be inclined to use artificial intelligence, especially when it comes to job-related tasks, purchases, or investments. About 53% of millennials have used kind of AI when it comes to their homework or schoolwork. So it's definitely concentrated. Overall usage is really concentrated in kind of that work-related tasks or kind of that homework, schoolwork area. But we do see kind of a growing usage, particularly among purchasing. About almost a quarter of young Canadians are using it for purchases, about 1 in 5 using it for kind of investments. So, as this space grows, it's definitely one to watch to determine how much and over time, how much AI is going to kind of find its way into how we make our decisions, how we go about living our lives on a day-to-day basis. And I'll turn it over to Allison to lead us through kind of our next section.
Thank you, Nick. So next, we're going to highlight some of the findings regarding youth and their finances, specifically their purchasing power and ability to afford housing. So what we see here, nearly identical to last year, we see that 29% of young people consider their personal finances to be in poor shape. We see this higher among millennials, with 35% reporting poorer compared to 25% of Gen Z who report the same. We also found this year that 51% of youth indicate they are living paycheck to paycheck, which is an increase of 4 percentage points over last year. We see this proportion being higher among millennials compared to Gen Z as well this year in this year's study. When it comes to their financial knowledge, 1/3 of youth indicate they don't have enough financial knowledge to make sound decisions about their money, and we're finding this to be consistent among the millennials and the Gen Z. Further, 1/4 of youth indicate in this year's study that they don't have any type of savings or investments, with 31% of Gen Z indicating they have none, compared to 21% of millennials. Now, among those who are saving or investing, we found this year that 57% indicate they're doing so for financial security, while 32% indicating that they're doing so to purchase a home, which is higher among Gen Z compared to millennials, which you might expect. So moving on to the next slide, I'm going to explore a little bit further their finances specific to housing. So what we see here, and you can see in the illustration that it shows various aspects of youth's financial situation specific to housing. Results are very similar again to what we saw last year, but I'd like to draw everyone's attention to the renter results. So we see here that 4 in 5 youth indicate they are renting because they are unable to buy property. Nearly 3 in 4 feel their rent takes up too much of their expenses. And over 2/3 don't think they'll be able to buy property in the next few years. Further, what's also very interesting in this year's study is that 1 in 4 indicate they have had to move because of a rent hike. So these results and this kind of whole picture of what the numbers are telling us is very reflective of the challenges that youth and quite frankly all Canadians are facing when it comes to inflation and the affordable housing crisis and issues that are plaguing, every Canadian across the country. So next slide. When we want to talk about the rising costs of living, aside from housing, it's impacted younger generations' financial habits all around. And quite frankly, we see it affecting them at higher levels than what we saw last year. I want to point out some notable increases over last year that we see some larger impacts in how they're spending their money on. Specifically, when it comes to clothing, that's increased by 9 percentage points. Cultural outings has increased by 9 percentage points. Their regular payments of their credit cards and bills is up 9 percentage points, as well as their leisure and sports activity spending up 9 percentage points. So just seeing some of the impacts that the rising costs are having aside from their future goals and their financial savings, but more in their day-to-day life. So overall, youth are feeling the pinch from all angles and an increasingly concerning rate as we're seeing these rise across every aspect that we tested or that we asked of youth. But further to finances, I'd like to turn it over back to Nick, and he's going to talk us through the employment, perception of employment, and we're going to find out what really matters to youth. What more than salary are they telling us? Nick?
Perfect. Thank you. So yeah, I'm going to be walking through kind of our employment section and really discussing kind of how financial pressures impact the decisions that young generations are making when it comes to their employment. So to start, and this is a question that we have been asking for the last kind of 3 years. We ask, our survey participants here, do you intend to quit your job in the next year? 25% in 2021 was kind of in the middle of the pandemic. And this was around the time where there was a lot of discussion about the Great Resignation and, saw a lot of movement kind of in the job market, a lot of people switching jobs, taking on new opportunities as they came out during the pandemic. So that we saw a lot of folks, about a quarter of young Canadians indicating that, yeah, I intend to quit my job in the next year. 2022, and this is where, the economy started opening up a little bit more, restrictions started lifting. We saw a big drop in that percentage of folks indicating that, yes, I'm likely to leave my job. 13. A little bit of an uptick this year to 15, but I think the main kind of area where that's coming from is particularly among the Gen Z folks, about 22% indicating that they're planning to quit their job in the next year. That's up 6%. We might think about what are the factors that kind of influence that, Gen Z being kind of the younger cohort, maybe, still exploring what their career options are, looking at new opportunities, less so than kind of millennials, which at 11% there. So I think, we're well past the discussion about the Great Resignation. We're seeing some stability around here in terms of, 13, 15% from 13 from last year, 15% from this year. So a small increase, but well below kind of what we were seeing during the kind of great resignation discussion. We also, and this is a continual finding that we have in kind of our youth study is kind of, what are the reasons you want to quit your job? Obviously, salary has consistently been the #1 reason for why people leave their job. But, looking past that, we see things like taking on new challenges or looking for advancement with a company, or, they're just bored at their current job. Specific to Gen Z folks, and this might be kind of factors into why they're considering leaving more so than millennials. They don't have enough flexibility, or the employer's mission doesn't resonate with me. So, while we still try to figure out how do we balance kind of the benefits we might have seen from the remote work situation as a result of the pandemic, and ensuring that employees still have that ability to work flexibly. But I think the key here, and when we're talking about Gen Z folks, is kind of that mission statement. Does your organization's values kind of line up with kind of what the values are of Generation Z folks? And I think that is something that we'll continue to monitor, and something that employers need to keep in mind when they're hiring younger folks. It's not just ensuring that the basics like salary, et cetera, are there. It's also what is the purpose? What is your organizational's purpose? Does it speak to kind of your employees? How do you keep them engaged? And I think that portion really helps deal with kind of not finding the job stimulating, or not finding the job challenging when you're part of a greater kind of company purpose or mission. This leads us kind of to our HR benefits simulator. Now, we've always seen in this research that salary is important, but we wanted to see kind of where does salary become less important, and how do the other non-wage benefits impact a decision somebody makes when they're trying to weigh different employment offers. So the HR benefits simulator kind of asks our respondents ways in which we can kind of get at go beyond kind of just the salary feature here. So we looked at different conditions of employment, how important some of these conditions are in the decision-making process, and it also allows us to understand how we can present job offers that will appeal kind of to the greatest number of candidates as well. So we surveyed the generations on 6 key dimensions when it came to employment. So obviously one of them was salary, vacation allotment, employee benefits, working hours, the place of work. So what I mean by that is like in person in the office, or hybrid, or fully remote, and then indirect conditions as well. So this would be things like opportunity for advancement. And so when we kind of looked at kind of the importance factor here, obviously consistent with what we've always been seeing, salary is #1. And we kept this breakout here between millennials and Gen Z folks, just to show that there isn't like a huge difference between both groups here. They're pretty in line with the fact that salary is important. Then that's followed by kind of employee benefits, vacation, place of work, work hours, and indirect conditions. So while young people are more concerned about wages, there's also a degree of importance attached to other conditions. And I would point out the fact that, salary doesn't make up the whole kind of majority of the factor here, right? It's only accounts for 44% of kind of our simulator as a factor of importance here. So we're taking kind of an example here. So assume, looking at, we have a young worker here, and maybe she's received 3 job offers. So from employer 1, the offer consists of a 10% raise from what they're currently making, 2 weeks of vacation. The employee benefits would be group insurance with a pension plan, work hours 5 days a week. Place of work would be hybrid with kind of a minimum of maybe 2 days in the office, and then indirect working conditions, health allowance. Employer offer 2 would be no change to salary, 3 weeks vacation, a group insurance with a pension plan. Work hours would maybe include a summer schedule, so maybe Fridays off during the summer. Place of work would be kind of similar, the hybrid with a minimum number of days in office. Indirect working conditions would be a bit different though. Employee assistance program, health allowance, ongoing training and mentoring, and opportunities for advancements. The third offer would feature kind of a 5% cut in their overall salary, but unlimited vacation, group insurance with pension plan, a 4-day work week throughout the year, and 100% teleworking with kind of indirect working conditions for opportunities for advancement. So I'll leave this up on screen for just a moment, and I want you to consider, what would be out of these three kind of be the one that would be considered. We'll be going through a couple of slides and we'll come back to this, but just leave that up on a screen. Make a kind of mental note. Which offer do you think, based on kind of our simulator, would this young worker go for? So take a moment to just evaluate them, and we'll circle back. Okay. So just to kind of go through our market simulator, as an employer with our simulator, you're able to test different offers to candidates to see what would be the most attractive. And you can also kind of compare offers from competitors in your industry by, using this drop down. So, we've set up kind of different features here that to match and play around with constructing an offer, and it will allow us or allow you to see, what would be the preference share that a prospective employee might have toward each offer that you construct here. So, in the screenshot here, we have the example of working on alternative one, which would be one of the offers. So you're able to drop down kind of and customize kind of what that offer might look like, as well with offer two. When we're talking about maybe the kind of indirect working conditions, we're able to select kind of how many of those working conditions we would include as well. And then also vacation here. So the drop down really works to ensure that you're able to customize scenarios and really be agile in responding to kind of what the market needs might be for attracting younger talent to your organization. Now, circling back, so, thinking back to that scenario where we have the young worker with the 3 offers, it was actually offer or alternative 2 from the employer that had the highest share of preference, 36.9% versus 33 in offer 1 and 28 in offer 3. I think part of this exercise really shows us that, and part of the simulator really shows us that, while salary is very important and it's, certainly a factor in the decision making, it isn't the only factor in the decision making that a young employee is looking for. The tool here allows employers to really try to respond and anticipate what kind of the needs might be of young workers in particular. Option one, was a strong offer, with a lot of weight in the importance piece on salary. So that 10% raise there, certainly a factor. But I think where things change is when we start tweaking, the vacation allotment, the working hours. That really is a factor here in how folks make their ultimate decision. Option 3, ultimately, we know that salary is an important factor, so a 5% cut certainly brings it down in comparison to option 2. But we do see kind of, vacation and working hours being different in kind of those two features with option 3. So the kind of HR benefits simulator here really allows you to get a little bit more insight into kind of what might be playing in terms of the decision-making process that young workers have. And it allows you to kind of mix and match. Okay, if I remove this and add that, how does that potentially impact the decision-making that ultimately somebody might go with when we're reaching out to them with an offer? So really the point of this exercise was to show kind of how salary plays a role, but not the only role in kind of the employment considerations for young people. And that kind of brings us to kind of the end of our presentation. So we'll have the full report, and you'll receive a copy of that, as well as a copy of today's video recording, and that will all be sent by email. But looking through, I think we have some folks asking some questions, so we'll be taking some time to go through those as well.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. So I've gone through and answered a few questions already. So I will reiterate what those questions were and what some of the answers were. And please feel free to continue to ask questions if you have any. Just to remind everyone, the session has been recorded. Everyone will receive a recording. They will receive the presentation and the full report as well, which goes in a bit more depth in some of the topics that Nicholas and I have covered this morning. We had a question that just mentioned, out of curiosity, is there a reason you only survey millennials and Gen Z instead of including a control group like like boomers and Gen Y? Just hard to understand how millennials and Gen Z are different without a control group. Very interesting point and great point to make in determining the differences. While during our presentations, we've always inferred some of the differences or reasons for the differences that we feel may be leading some of the perceptions that we uncover through the study itself. The main focus of this study is just to gauge youth's perceptions and current perceptions rather than to make it a direct comparison between other generations. However, that's a really interesting point and something we have kind of floated around and it's been brought up before about having a comparison study, if you will, with other generations. So there was a note just noting that women are not more likely to be depressed, just to report. That is correct. Thank you for that clarification. And then we had an attendee ask, do you have a question to determine how many people believe there is a climate crisis, or is this the crisis that should be focused on? The economic and political crisis climate researchers, we need to be reporting on both sides. That's correct. So we do dive into the report, in the full report, a little bit more on their perceptions specifically to climate crisis and how stressed they feel about that. In terms of the trust that we've done in the past on traditional institutions and such, there's more results in the full report that dive into these matters a little bit more. And then we had a issue with the screen. I think that's been okay. There was one question here, and it was, how are youth using AI to make purchases and investments? I don't believe we asked that specifically in the study. So I don't know if we can speak to that specifically at this moment in time.
Yeah, I mean, I think anecdotally, I think some examples of AI for purchases, at least, I know that there are, and there's a growing kind of space in this in terms of browser add-ons that will look for coupons that automatically get applied to any kind of online purchase you're making. So seen an uptick in that. And I also think when it comes to investments, a lot of different financial institutions these days are offering kind of robo advisor, robo investor platforms where an AI tool kind of based on your risk profile makes the choices for your overall investment strategy. So those are kind of examples in which we didn't obviously mention those in the study, but those are examples of kind of where AI is creeping into kind of the purchasing space and investment space as well.
The next question, Nick, is the HR benefits simulator available publicly, and is it based on survey answers received from this youth survey or a separate survey?
Yes, so that is available to purchase, and happy to connect you with kind of a member of our team as well. Primarily would be based kind of on the answers provided in this survey. So it's created a kind of model that allows us to kind of use this in future research as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So we had another question regarding the differences between generations. We don't have the context for that in what we have available within this survey. Only, as I mentioned earlier, our perceptions and perceptions from the results that we've seen over the years. We have a note here: if Gen Zs are worried about the cost of saving enough for a down payment for a house, why would they take a job with 10% less income as an option too? I think here, I mean, we didn't put it in context of, you know, how their savings are or how their financial goals are impacted or could be impacting the responses that they gave in the simulator and in constructing the simulator. However, I think the simulator was more to just highlight what really is important to youth when it comes to making the decisions of their employment and where they're going to be investing their time and their energy with an employer. But unfortunately, less about how that might impact or how their answers might be related to their financial ambitions.
Mhm. One thing I will add is that, the great thing about the simulator is that it's, fully customizable for any organization. So you can use your own data to kind of plug into this in order to, fit the needs of your organization as well.
Yeah. Are job types in the study full-time employment only or all types included in part-time or non-permanent, specifically to the simulator?
I'll have to double check on that, but I believe it was all types of employment, but we can circle back on that one.
And do you have any info on how these generations feel about large versus small business? I know during the pandemic there was a push to support small business. Is this holding? I'm gonna glance through the report really quickly. I know we did focus on that in past iterations, not specifically in supporting small business, just in how you're spending, where you're supporting local. I don't believe that was as covered in this year's iteration. But we do have past research on that in past studies, which are available online at the Leger website. As recruiters, how would you recommend we speak to these areas to attract graduates to job opportunities? How might we put this into a presentation where we speak to what an industry is doing to address things like climate change or addressing what job candidates are looking for in a job in a way that is attractive to that generation? Any suggestions?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think one of the things that, and going back to a few slides where we're talking about being aligned with an organization's mission, specifically the Gen Z folks, finding that as a reason why they're leaving a job. They just feel like they're not aligned with an organization's mission. Knowing that the climate crisis is an important issue facing young people, I think it's incredibly important for organizations, employers, et cetera, to talk about what their part is and what they're doing as a partner in kind of addressing climate change. Obviously, not every industry is the same in their relation to climate change, but if, we're talking about kind of a restaurant or something in food and beverage, there are real applications that the industry is taking to combat food waste, to combat the use of plastics, and I think really communicating that and really communicating, we don't just talk the talk, we walk it as well, can address some of the kind of data that we're seeing where, young folks want to feel like they're part of something more than just themselves. They want to feel a part of a mission. So I think positioning kind of not only the offer, but really the organization as kind of, having a clear mission around climate change or whatever kind of social issue that might be relevant to young people, addresses kind of that concern about, can I see myself working here and a part of the culture of this organization and really working toward a mission that's a little bit bigger than myself. I think that is a way to kind of not only speak to prospective employees, but really get at kind of that issue around climate change and kind of how you might be a partner in that solution.
Thank you, Nick. We have a comment here that I think it will be interesting to see how the finance numbers change, as a lot of people are going to be up for renewal on their mortgages with increased interest rates. Were there any questions related to this? There weren't specific to their interest rates and how that's impacting them, where we actually ask specifically about interest rates. However, we do have the question, and we've been tracking it over a few years now, whether they feel that their mortgage takes up too much of their expenses, and whether they feel that their mortgage is too high compared to their salaries. I think if we're going to be seeing any impacts in that regard, that's where we're going to notice it, specifically this year compared to, or next year's study compared to this year's. As a boomer nearing retirement, the financial concerns the youth are expressing are really no different than what we expressed at the same ages. Not enough money, not enough savings. Will I ever be able to own a house? Having to move to a cheaper location to buy or save to buy. So many problems that are looked on as unique are very universal. Yeah, I think those perceptions are probably very unique. I would agree with you there. I think where the differences for youth are compared to past generations is obviously the impact of the crises that have happened as of, over the past 10 years, some of the big changes that have happened with technology, with these generations growing up. Also, I think the focus on, or the shift in mental health, and how those are being addressed and supported and discussed more openly. I think there's a few other key differences with these generations compared to the past, as well in their life cycle that we've noticed with the youth today compared to past. In our very first study, we talked about how past generations were more linear in how they, finished primary school, went to post-secondary, purchased a home, had a job, 30 plus years, had that pension. We're not seeing that with youth today. They're a lot more, I don't want to say volatile, but they have a lot more twists and turns, and they're tending to do some of those big life moments a little bit later than past generations. So I think that's where the change in perception is coming from, than how it's different from the older generations. Any look at differences between rural and urban interviewees? We do have regional breakdowns. However, we don't go into that granular of differences within the report. If you have any questions regarding the report when you get the copy, or if you'd like to see anything, understand anything a little bit more, please feel free to reach out to solutions@leger360.com, and we can definitely help to support to help you uncover anything else that you might find interesting. Youth are entering the job market with much lower wages. Yeah, I would agree with that, considering also the inflation rates and economic situations. Notable differences between regions. Not that I have offhand to present at the moment, but if there is any questions pertaining to that after you receive the report, as I noted, please let us know. I'm just double checking the answered ones to see if there's anything we can share with everybody. I think we're okay. Okay, yeah, there was a question regarding cost of the simulator. If you have any inquiries related to that, please reach out to solutions@leger360.com. Okay. I think that's everything I'm seeing come through.
Yeah.
If there's any others? All right, everyone. Well, thank you very much. I think this is, we've got a lot of great questions in the end. Appreciate the interaction and the contributions today. On behalf of Nicholas and myself and everyone else at Leger who work on this study, we thank you all for attending, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.